All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should start. It's been a wonderful day, but a long one, so I think we have to stick to the timetable. Let me introduce myself to those we haven't met. I'm Ralph Evans, and John Gatorner asked me to be MC so that he doesn't have to field all the technical questions all the time, which are likely to come up. Now, I need to acquaint you with what's going to happen during the evening because it's a little bit complicated. There will be what we term a starter and an entree, two courses delivered in very quick succession. Then there will be a very short presentation by some traditional dancers here on the stage. And then our main course will be served. And after the main course, I will introduce our speaker, Michael Belfiore. And of course, finally after that, the vote of thanks will be given by Darryl Judd, COO of Logistics Executive Recruitment, our very generous sponsor for tonight's dinner. And the buses will leave sometime later in the evening. So that's all for me. Thank you, and I'll be back to introduce the speaker later on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. It's time not for dancing, but to introduce our speaker. Now, I'm sure you've always wanted to know, did Al Gore invent the internet? Did Sir Tim Berners-Lee? Where did GPS come from? Should space travel be the domain of private companies, like air travel? You'll find the answers to these and many other questions with our speaker, Michael Belfiore. We had a small dose of what Michael could say early this afternoon, those of us who are here, who were there then. Michael's an author, a prolific blogger, and a commentator on innovation and science as applied to business. Michael's books include The Department of Mad Scientists, of which you've all got a copy. There'll be a quiz at 10 tomorrow on chapter 4 of this book. And another one, Rocketeers. It's got a longer title, but it's about private space travel. He appears often on radio and TV and as a speaker at occasions such as this. He lives in New York State and has come especially for tonight. So let me introduce Michael Belfiore.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. It's so great to be here. I just want to thank John Gatorna and his staff, Jackie Turner, Glenda Roberts. These people are amazing in bringing me here and making this whole event happen. And just give them a round of applause. Yeah. So I've come here to talk about innovation. And by that I mean disruptive innovation. And that's what I focus on as a journalist. I write for magazines and books and talk about innovations that are going to change the way we all live and work. And it's a very exciting field for me. There's a lot going on, as we all know. And I spend a lot of time talking with people who are quite literally changing the world. And these people are all utterly unique. And their organizations they work within are completely, utterly unique. But I found certain commonalities. There are certain core principles that these folks tend to operate under. And these are some things that I wanted to share with you tonight with the hope that I might spark some inspiration that would help you in your own businesses. The thing is, something so extraordinary has happened, something so amazingly disruptive that I just have to I'm compelled to devote this time I have with you tonight to this one event. This just happened a couple of weeks ago. What I'm going to do is wrap in these other principles that I'm going to talk about into this description of this breakthrough and how it came to be. Some of you might have an idea of what I'm going to talk about already, and the rest of you just bear with me. I'll get to it. It's going to be good, okay? So, all right, here we go. Let's start with a little perspective. I talked about this earlier today in the panel on innovation. This photograph was taken by the very first people to reach the moon. So on Christmas 1968, Jim Lovell, Frank Borman, and Bill Anders flew around the backside of the moon, the side we never see from Earth, and coming back out on the other side, they took this photo. And this photo changed everything. This was the first time that we humans were able to look back in its entirety on our home in space from space. Unbelievable. And Jim Lovell said that you could actually reach out and put your thumb over the entire planet. You should just imagine that. You put your thumb out over on all the continents, all the oceans, all of human history, everything that we humans have ever known under your thumb. It's unbelievable. And this photo was credited with starting the modern environmental movement. Astronauts have told me that they don't think it's possible to see the Earth from space and not come back an environmentalist, right? Because you don't see borders from space. You don't see national boundaries, no political divisions, there's no fences, no walls. There's just the shared continents, oceans, and an atmosphere. We're all riding the same spaceship. And how we got to this view is equally amazing. This is the most powerful rocket ever to fly. It cost $100 billion in today's dollars took 10 years of effort by some of the most dedicated, talented, forward-looking people on the planet. Some said this is America's finest achievement, never since matched. It's crowning moment. And a lot of people were saying back then, this is a new era for humanity, the first time that we've left our home planet to stay. And, you know, it really is the first time that life itself has left its cradle in 3.5 billion years. But actually, it's not to be, at least not so quickly. We stopped building the moon rockets. We tore down the infrastructure for being able to do so. We threw away the plans. I mean, really, 25 people went to the moon, only a dozen walked on it, and then we threw it all away. A friend of mine who grew up in Huntsville, where these rockets were built, said it was like a bunch of aliens came down from another planet, built a bunch of cool stuff, and then left. Instead, we got this. I mean, look at this beast. This, you know, it's made to fly with wings, and yet it's attached to this 33-ton external fuel tank with spray-on foam insulation and lashed to a couple of solid fuel missiles that can't be shut down. So when these things light, baby, you better pray you didn't have a problem. Oops. You know, and foam flying off that fuel tank was a real problem also. Yeah. So, you know, 14 astronauts lost their lives for a vehicle that couldn't even leave low Earth orbit. So NASA retired the last 3 of these vehicles last year before any more could self-destruct and kill any more astronauts. And the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration has nothing with which to replace them. You know, spent $10 billion in the better part of the last 10 years trying to build a new launch vehicle and a new spacecraft. Still, there's nothing flying. Well, why is that? What happened? Well, after NASA reached the moon, it became a bureaucracy more dedicated to furthering its own existence and its established ways of doing things than actually dedicated innovation. I mean, space, which was its original reason for being, became the excuse for the organization. So, you know, just how far we have fallen from that transcendent view of Earthrise. I mean, so just think, you know, this is a real problem. So you're all working in your own organizations with challenges, and you all think these are pretty big challenges that you're working with, but this is really big, and I think it has some bearing, it bears thinking about for what lessons we might be able to take back to our own businesses. I mean, how do you get back to transcendent innovation? How do you go from this back to this? Right, so I was talking with Andy Switke, who's here, I think, who's on the innovation panel with me. Before we even came to Singapore, we were talking about the importance of vision for an organization. And, you know, I mentioned this often comes from a charismatic leader, you know, someone like Steve Jobs, somebody like this, right? But Andy was really quick to point out, well, you don't really need a charismatic leader to drive innovation. What you need is a vision, a set of guiding principles, a mission, if you will. You don't actually need this person. I mean, this person, you know, a charismatic leader at the helm can help, but what happens when they're gone? You know, and I have to agree with that. A really good example of that is the Department of Mad Scientists, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's a small, very, very small corner of the U.S. Department of Defense. This organization has an amazing 25% turnover among its entire employee population every single year. And its leaders serve terms of only 2 or 3 years before they're gone. And yet, for more than 50 years, this agency has remained America's most successful innovation machine. And a big part of that reason is because of this vision it has, a sense of mission, which is this. The DARPA's mission is to both prevent and create technological surprise. And that's pretty much it. Now, interestingly, DARPA and NASA got started at the same time for the same reason. It's to get the high ground in space from Russia. In 1957, Russia launched Sputnik, which is the first artificial satellite, and DARPA was the Eisenhower administration's immediate response. It was called ARPA then, without the D for defense. It was the same organization. NASA took, and by the way, the concept was really interesting. Just take a bunch of really smart people from universities, academia, corporations, put them in a big room and have them come up with crazy ideas, and then go out and find other groups of people and try to make them happen. And NASA took a little longer to get established, but it came along soon after, and its mission was always about space, right from day one. You know, faster, higher, more, which ultimately became about landing on the moon. No real vision beyond that, though, which caused all kinds of problems when it actually got there. Fresh thinking. I mean, okay, so this is what it comes down to. We all are trying to figure out how to get this fresh thinking. How to do it? Well, it's really simple. In an organization, you recruit the best people, you retain them, make sure they're happy, and then let them do their jobs. So you want to create, we were talking earlier in the innovation panel, you want to create an environment, a culture where failure is an option. You know, if you come down too hard on people who are taking risks that don't always pan out, they're going to get too cautious. So you want to give people the freedom to fail. That's a really big piece of this puzzle. But there's another really important way to bring in fresh thinking, which is to gather outside influence, get fresh perspective from outside. And now we're closing in on what it is I want to talk to you tonight, this event.
And in order to reach the space station, we will work with a growing array of private companies competing to make getting to space easier and more affordable. By buying the services of space transportation, rather than the vehicles themselves, we can continue to ensure rigorous safety standards are met, but we will also accelerate the pace of innovations as companies, from young startups to established leaders, compete to design and build and launch new means of carrying people and materials out of our atmosphere.
A lot of pushback from the bureaucrats who want to keep the status quo, keep doing the same thing they've always been doing. But the real innovators at NASA, the people who really do want to get America back in space, they embraced this wholeheartedly. And by the way, DARPA has operated this way from day one. DARPA has no laboratories, no proving grounds, no test centers. Its program managers have always outsourced, farmed out the work of writing code, building robots, and all the other things required for technological surprise. And it's worked out pretty well for them. And so NASA is trying to follow DARPA's example. You know, outsourcing the function of reaching low Earth orbit. That's what Obama was talking about here. A couple years ago, he made this speech. And to me, this speech is just as significant as Kennedy saying, let's go to the moon within 10 years. Doesn't it have quite the same ring? You know, we're going to outsource. But I think it's even more significant. You know, this is a way to free up resources at NASA for real innovation. Let's hand off this routine operation of reaching space in low Earth orbit, and then use those resources to reach out beyond low Earth orbit and into new frontiers for the first time in over 40 years. And this is actually working out really, really well. This, to me, is an inspiring sight. This launch took place just last month. This is the Falcon 9 rocket by Space Exploration Technologies. Is that same? Oh, go back one. So this thing generates 1 million pounds of thrust. There's 9 engines in that first stage. You know, you just think of this, 1 million pounds of thrust lifting all this weight into the sky with absolutely not a hitch. This launch went off beautifully. This thing hit the speed of sound in 1 minute and 10 seconds. You know, maximum dynamic pressure, you know, the place where it gets the most resistance from the atmosphere. 1 minute and 20 seconds, didn't even flinch. You know, 3 minutes in, I was hoping that video would play. It's pretty cool, but it's not essential. You know, really, I'm more interested in this view. This is the one that excites me more. This view of that same launch. 2, 1, 0. Come on! These are SpaceX employees, the company that built this thing. I just love that. You know, technology is one of the purest expressions of the human spirit, and you see that right here. These people are watching their hard work, their sweat, their labor, sleepless nights, pushing themselves to the limits and beyond, their inspiration, their passion. It's all paying off right here. And you can't buy that. You can't mandate it. You can't install it like some widget. You can't teach it. And yet this is really, really a very crucial piece of the puzzle. How do you get disruptive innovation? It's passion, spirit. And on top of that rocket was the SpaceX-built Dragon space capsule. And its mission was to become the very first commercial vehicle to dock with the International Space Station. And this is a function that only 4 government vehicles have done before. This is, of course, the American space shuttles, the Russian Soyuz and the Progress, its unmanned variant. The European Space Agency has a vehicle, and Japanese Space Agency is the HDV. And now, the SpaceX Dragon, just a couple of weeks ago. And this is the event that I wanted to spend a little time talking with you about today. This is something that really can't be, the importance of this cannot be overestimated, in my opinion. This is the first time in the more than 50 years of human space flight we've had a privately designed, built, and operated vehicle dock with a space station. You know, and actually, just in the spirit of that little dance, the dances that we saw earlier, I was going to try to attempt to show you what this looked like, okay? Just do a little interpret, because we can't really appreciate this without being there. So I'm just going to attempt. So imagine I'm the space station, and this is the robotic arm. It reached out to grab the SpaceX capsule, which is hovering, you know, flying in formation 17,000 miles an hour, and it's going to reach out, grab it, and pull it in to dock. Okay, you ready for this? Here we go. Okay, here we go. Very slow process. It took a couple hours just to grab the thing. But it's actually good. You know, sometimes you want a space mission to be boring. You know, and it's actually, this was a tweet somebody sent out. It was an avionics engineer at SpaceX. It's the slowest badassery I've ever seen. Yeah, that really sums it up. So this thing stayed on station for a few days. The astronauts on board the station unpacked supplies that were on board. There it is, there's the arm. Reloaded it with equipment, scientific experiments, things to return to Earth. It was an unmanned test vehicle. This is a demo flight, just to prove that a private company can do what only governments have done before. A big deal, right? Well, actually, it really is a big deal. You think about this from NASA's point of view. For the cost, NASA's cost for this whole thing is, for the development and the flight, is less than 1/3 of the cost of one space shuttle mission. So for that, they get this entirely new capability, and they get rescued from this utter embarrassment of having to bum rides off its former arch rival in the moon race, the Russians. And think about it from our point of view. We are now in the era of affordable, sustainable space travel and exploration. It's affordable because private companies have figured out how to do this thing much more affordably, with greater safety and greater reliability than government has. And it's sustainable because now that this is a business going into space, this activity is no longer dependent on fickle political government funding. You know, this is unbelievable. It's going to change a lot of things. This is a real game changer across a wide range of activities. And in fact, I've been looking forward to this essentially my entire life. I was 6 years old when I found this book at my local public library. And I picked it out because it was the only book I found that actually had pictures in it in the grown-up section. I mean, I shudder to think what would happen if I had found a book on meat and livestock production or something like this. I'm a vegetarian right now, for crying out loud. But in any case, it was this. Fortunately, it was this book. You know, this described a private mission to go to the moon. It's just blew me away, and it set the whole course of the rest of my life. And now I'm actually interacting on a regular basis with real people, not fictional characters, who are expanding humanity's sphere of economic influence beyond planet Earth. I mean, just tremendous. Great field to be in, great time to be in it. And this is a point in a talk I would normally tell you why this is so significant. What's going to change? What does it mean to us? Why should anyone care besides a few space fanatics? Like I said, this current event, I think, requires our full attention just a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this capsule, this spacecraft. See if my pointer works. There it goes. Yes. So this is two parts to the spacecraft. I think it's fair to say it's not an exaggeration to say this is the most advanced spacecraft ever built. This is the forward section here. This back section drops off before it returns from Earth orbit. And this, you see this gray line right here. That's a heat shield that protects the vehicle from the extreme heating of coming back through the atmosphere at some extreme rate, 25 times the speed of sound. Normally anything would burn up. This shield is rated for multiple re-entries, so it's reusable, and it's rated for higher temperatures than it would experience just coming back from low Earth orbit. I'll tell you a little bit why later. But contrast that to the space shuttle's system for doing the same thing. Instead of a single piece like that, it relied on 27,000 individual heat-resistant tiles, which had to be individually inspected, and many of which had to be replaced after every single flight. And that's way too many points of failure, as we found out with the second space shuttle accident. And some of those tiles got damaged, just the wrong ones, by that flying insulation off the foam, and we lost the crew and vehicle. Built-in escape system. This is another thing the shuttle lacks. So these things right here, these little rockets built into the vehicle, designed to rocket the crew away from a misbehaving launch. Right, so something goes wrong, a hard start, they call it in the industry, or basically flying shrapnel and expanding, gases going in the wrong direction. The crew gets rocketed to safety by this system. If the shuttle had a system like this, the crew on the first shuttle accident would have survived. Those folks, you realize, they survived the breakup of the vehicle in mid-flight. They lived all the way to impact with the Atlantic Ocean. Which they know because after they recovered the crew compartment, the switches were all in the emergency settings. We don't ever want to put a crew through that again, and now we don't have to. It's really a great piece of equipment. And let me just talk a little bit about the launch vehicle. This is the Falcon 9, and that's Elon Musk, the head of the company, founder, chief designer. He's sort of a modern-day Von Braun, the guy who built the moon rockets or led the development of it. This 9 Merlin engines I mentioned before give a combined thrust of about 1 million pounds, or 5 meganewtons for you metrically inclined. Your engine-out capability. This thing can lose an engine on the way to orbit and still make the mission. It's the first time we've had that capability since the moon rockets. And here's what's coming. So that's the Falcon Heavy. It's got 27 engines instead of 9 for 3 times the thrust. That's the equivalent of 15 747s going full power. And these sections here are all cross-feed with propellant. So that means this thing keeps going after these 2 drop off, and it's still mostly full of propellant. So SpaceX has fewer than 2,000 employees scattered across the country. They've got a headquarters and factory in Hawthorne, California, near Los Angeles, a test and rocket development center in McGregor, Texas, and a launch complex in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Under 2,000 people. How are they doing this? That's the $64,000 question. The Merlin engine, that is the linchpin of all the SpaceX vehicles, started out in propulsion chief Tom Mueller's garage, believe it or not. So, he was back in the early 2000s, he was building the world's largest amateur-built liquid-fueled rocket engine in his garage. One day he was tightening some bolts to get this thing onto an airframe so he could go out and test it in the Mojave Desert. And in walks Elon Musk, unannounced, and he's really well-dressed, great, beautiful Italian shoes, beautiful woman on his arm, and he starts pelting Tom with questions. And Tom's thinking, who the hell is this guy, and why is he bothering me? But Tom's a nice guy, and he answered the questions, which actually all just boil down to one. Can you build me a bigger one? So Tom, Elon, a couple other people, they hashed out ideas over barbecues at various people's houses over the next few weekends, and they came up with the plan that became Space Exploration Technologies. In 2002, they got started with financing from Elon, who had just made a mint, selling another company he co-founded, PayPal, to eBay, and they were off and running. Tom's engine turned out to be the prototype. It evolved into the Merlin engine, the Merlin SpaceX engine. And this was planned from the beginning, that they'd build one really well-designed engine and use that as the linchpin, for, the power plant for all of the vehicles. I had Tom sketch this out for me. It's a pretty cool device. It's actually really simple. You see, the schematic is, simple in design, but very hard to do in build and in test. These hard starts are distressingly common for people just starting out in this business. But this gives you a sense of the simplicity of doing something like this. You've got one really solid piece of equipment, and you're going to just kind of use that as a linchpin for everything else you do. They started out in a small factory near the Los Angeles airport, building the Falcon 1, which had one of these engines powering it, could get a small satellite to orbit. And they were going to go to a Falcon 5 with 5 engines in the first stage, but instead they went right to the F9. And actually got a chance to watch the very first full duration run of this engine. First time they ran it for the full length of time needed to get to orbit. And it was really cool. In McGregor, in Texas, it's actually a sound you can feel in your chest when this thing is running, even in a concrete bunker buried in a hillside. And the sound of this one engine wakes up babies in the town of McGregor, miles away. So I can only imagine that the full 9-engine stack must have them bouncing around in their cribs like jumping beans. Pretty cool to think about. And one of these days when you get out for one of those, they have it on a huge test stand. It's called the BFTS. Yeah, right, but they assure me it stands for the Big Falcon Test Stand. But to do things like this, to really move the needle, it really requires taking risks. And, that requires nerve. Regina Dugan, the recently outgoing director of DARPA, likes to point out that it takes the same nerve to go for a big achievement and succeed as it does to try and fail. Right, so I'll say it again. So it takes the same nerve to make the attempt and succeed as it does to do it and fail. The thing is, you can't pull a punch. You've got to follow through with whatever it is you're doing with the assurance that you're going to succeed even though you know you really might not. So failure is not an option is NASA's famous axiom, and it's really not a good operating principle for innovation. And aversity to risk is a big part of the reason why NASA's manned space program has kept going in circles around planet Earth instead of pushing out beyond for the last 40 years. It's not that you're trying to fail, it's just that you don't let the fear of failure stop you from taking the risks that you need to ultimately succeed. So a good example is SpaceX's first 3 launches failed. And Elon Musk put everything he had into that 4th launch. And then after it was successful, instead of sitting back and growing fat off these launch contracts that were far more affordable, competitive than anything else in the market, he went right to the development on the Falcon 9. Nerve. So SpaceX came up from Tom Mueller's garage through design, build, and flight test of all new rocket engines, launch vehicles, spacecraft, in 10 years and under $1 billion. And you consider that NASA spent $1.5 billion on every single space shuttle launch and is still spending $10 billion and counting on a vehicle that's nowhere near ready for flight. It's a pretty big contrast. You know, Elon's mission from the beginning has been to build the most affordable launch vehicles as well as the most reliable and the safest. And as I said, using this one engine design as the basis for all of the vehicles is a big part of the reason why he's successful. And what else? Well, keeping the head count down is quite deliberate, and it's partly through automation as much as possible. The Dragon spacecraft, the cargo craft, is basically flies itself. Economies of scale drive down the unit cost of every single rocket engine, propellant tank, rocket fairing. The second stage tanks and fairings are basically shortened versions of the first stage systems. You know, you got a great design, just reuse it as much as possible. That's why the Falcon Heavy is going to have those Falcon 9 first stages as its own stages, and why the Heavy is going to use the Merlin as the Falcon 9 did, as the Falcon 1 did. It's all, you know, about reaching a level of simplicity and efficiency. And in contrast to NASA, which, Andy and I were talking about on the innovation panel earlier today, in contrast to NASA, which tends to scatter build of all of its, vehicles and rockets across the country, solid fuel rockets here, external fuel tank there. SpaceX does everything in one house. It's all under one roof. Musk looks to Henry Ford as inspiration. He likes to point out that Ford didn't invent the internal combustion engine, he just figured out how to make it better. And just as in Ford's early auto plants, raw materials go in one end of the SpaceX factory, and completed spacecraft and vehicles come out the other end. And it's really a pretty amazing sight. You get up on a balcony at one side of the factory, and you can actually see, look out over the entire 500,000 square foot factory floor, and you can see avionics being built. People are actually putting individual circuit boards together, spacecraft coming together, tanks and fuselages being friction stir welded. Even if there's a space mission going on, mission control is right there on the factory floor. The engineers are just steps away so that they can walk out onto the floor anytime they want and interact with the people who are actually building what they're designing. Very few walls at SpaceX. Even mission control, which requires quiet for focus for the people working there, has glass walls. So do the conference rooms in the engineering section. The cubicles that the engineers work in, are very low walls. They can all look over across at each other, talk. Even Elon Musk himself, he works in a cube right out in the middle of all of the other people. This is all geared toward fostering an efficient exchange of ideas and collaboration. I see this in a lot of places I visit. Kind of open wall sort of thing where people are encouraged to mingle, exchange ideas, even informally. That's why the break room at SpaceX is right there on the factory floor also. Lots of chances for people to interact and mingle. And why is he doing this? Why is Elon Musk doing this crazy thing? It's not to become a NASA contractor, which is certainly helping further the mission, but the NASA contractor trap has killed many an innovative space launch business. Elon Musk has had this central vision for SpaceX from day one. It's been driving everything he's been doing, and I'm going to tell you in a minute what that one mission is if you don't already know. But I just want to go over one last point that I want to make about disruptive innovation and the ways in which it can happen. So we talked about focus. The last point I want to make is about precision. So the SpaceX Dragon capsule splashed down in the Pacific Ocean within a mile of its target, about 500 miles off the coast of Baja, California. So they said afterwards that if it wasn't for wind drift, we could have put this thing down in somebody's backyard. That's it's pretty precise. And that sums up SpaceX's operating philosophy pretty well. We do a few things very, very well with extreme precision. And why are we doing this? Why are they doing this? No, it's not to service the International Space Station. Although that's coming. NASA's got a contract with them now, $1.6 billion for the next 12 cargo flights, really saving their bacon. It's not to send astronauts to low Earth orbit, although that's coming. It's not even to build the most powerful rocket since the Saturn V, although that's in development too, and they in fact have the first satellite launch contract for that one on the books. No, it's for this. So that video is not playing either. Let's try one more time. This has a great shot at the end of it that illustrates what I'm talking about. There you go.
There's only one major development item.
There's the escape system flying off there.
We're going to build the escape entrance into the sidewall of the spacecraft. You'll actually be able to have escape capability all the way to orbit. Even the Apollo didn't have that. Also, because you don't have to release the escape tower every time, you don't have that as a necessary thing that has to occur with every flight.
So where is that place? Anyone recognize it? Mars! SpaceX's central vision is to send the first humans to the planet Mars. Whew. Well, people have talked about this for decades. Since the space age began, there's been serious talk. How are we going to do this? But no one has had even the nerve to even get started on this. It's a very challenging problem. Just to put it in perspective, it took the moon astronauts traveling in the fastest vehicle ever built, 25,000 miles per hour, 8 miles a second, took them 3 days to get to the moon. Going that speed, it's going to take them 6 months to get to Mars. And the spacecraft is going to be bombarded with potentially lethal cosmic radiation the entire way. Elon Musk says he can do this, give us this capability within 10 years. And why is he doing this? Why would this crazy, what, let's do a stunt? No. Elon's got this idea that, and actually this is true. I don't mean to belittle this at all. We're only one asteroid strike for being wiped out as a civilization. Somebody earlier today mentioned this. And as Elon likes to point out, the dinosaurs only could eat each other one at a time. They didn't possess weapons of mass destruction. So Elon Musk and SpaceX are trying to save the world. How's that for vision? We're living in an extraordinary time. These people are just at the vanguard. They're part of a whole movement, a vanguard of a technological and perceptual revolution that's going to change everything. It's going to, space, routine, affordable space travel is going to have as big an impact on our society and the businesses we work in as the automobile, for instance, or the airplane, the internet. It's really an exciting time to be reporting on this, and this is just an example of some of the things I've been covering. This is a cover story I wrote earlier this year for Air and Space. This guy, Eric Anderson, is not only building the first commercial manned moon mission, he's also co-leader of a company called Planetary Resources, whose mission is to mine asteroids. The idea is to harvest volatiles like water, oxygen, hydrogen, to enable the permanent settlement of outer space. And part of the way they're going to fund this activity is by extracting rare materials. They're rare on Earth, but common in asteroids, platinum group metals, and export them back to Earth. Totally nuts, right? Sounds crazy. Until you think about who he's got working with him. He's got a group of billionaire investors, including Charles Simonyi, formerly of Microsoft. He's got Larry Page as an investor of Google, Eric Schmidt, another Google guy, and he's got some of the best talent in the world. People recruited right from NASA from working on their Mars rovers, the latest one of which is on its way there now. It's going to land in a couple of months. If there's anyone in the world, any organization that has a chance of even beginning to advance along this path, it's these guys. So watch out for Planetary Resources. Another quick example, another cover story I published this year, Popular Mechanics. This is the world's largest airplane. It's being built in Mojave, California by Scaled Composites under contract with a company called Stratolaunch. And the idea is to launch SpaceX rockets at altitude. So this would allow you to move your launch location to the ideal insertion point for the orbit you want. So for instance, it would save you from having to spend 2 days chasing after the space station to dock with it, which is what they have to do now with fixed launch points. It also gives your rocket a leg up, so you can build a smaller vehicle for the same capacity and less money. You know, we are witnessing a rebirth, a space renaissance. We're going back to space in a big way, and it's all of us this time, not just a few government employees. Next year, you personally will be able to ride this vehicle out of the atmosphere for a few minutes of weightless flight and a transformative view of the curvature of the Earth and a daytime sky that has turned utterly black. This is being built by Scaled Composites also for Virgin Galactic, which you may have heard of. It's in flight test now. The first rocket-powered flights are going to happen any minute now, any day. I just like to think about what the world is going to be like when ordinary people can see this view for themselves. What innovations, what art forms, what social movements, what technologies will follow. We had a glimpse of this in the 1960s. It's certainly no accident that the modern environmental movement followed the moon program. And call me crazy, but I don't think the civil rights movement, rock and roll, the counterculture were entirely accidental either. You know, we had millions upon millions of people watching the first humans head to the moon. And they thought, my God, if we as a species can accomplish that, what else can we do? So I'm going to leave you with a question. What will you do with inspiration? That's really what it all comes down to. And it's clear now that with inspiration, the sky is no longer the limit. We're not just living in a science fiction world right now, but we're actively creating it, all of us, right here. So what will you do? How will you change your world, your businesses for the better? How will you contribute with a few powerful concepts? Now, get out there and get it done. Thank you.
Wow, Michael, that was exciting, but it's not to me to thank you. I've got to invite up Darryl Judd, COO from our kind sponsors, Logistics Executive Recruitment, to give a vote of thanks.
Wow, Michael, I have to say, I'm not sure whether it's the couple of glasses of fantastic Australian wine that I've enjoyed or whether it's the inspiration from your slides, but I'm genuinely not, I'm blown away. I mean, we all dream of some of the things that you've talked about, and it was really interesting. You talk about supply chain innovation. I'm pretty sure I saw Robert Yap and Wayne Hunt writing about the next supply chains to bring this platinum metals back. So, guys, I hope you've got some great ideas for that. Dr. Gatorna, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful day. I mean, very informative. And one of the wonderful things about being a part of this, and this is the third event of its kind, is the exchange of ideas that we all have when we get into a forum like this. And I think, Michael, you've just touched on some of that. A little bit closer to home, but it brought back memories of an event that happened this week, actually. We talk about vision, fresh thinking, or thinking differently as in the Apple term, and simplicity. This week was the Apple Development Conference. And one of the interesting things that for me that came out of that when I was watching Bloomberg yesterday was this number came across the screen. I think I've had a chat to a couple of you this morning about it. 30 billion downloads of apps. 30 billion, just think of that number. $5 billion paid to developers in the last 5 years. Now, for me, that's an astounding number when you consider that's an industry that didn't exist 5 years ago. And I think it came about because visionary leaders like Steve Jobs and others, Richard Branson is in the same, he was the first mover with the spacecraft we just saw in the photograph a minute ago. Those visionary leaders take us to places that we can't even dream of. And I think it's our challenge tomorrow and over the next few days to harness some of the ideas that are in the room and start to actually embrace those, and through conversation and ideas such as Michael shared with us tonight, to be able to take back to our workplaces and make these things reality. So, you know, Wayne Hunt, wherever you are, Robert Yaps of the world, I hope that, you know, we are in 5 years' time talking about the next supply chains in space. I'd like to please thank our distinguished speaker. Michael, absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for joining us. You've come all this way and given us your time. So thank you very much. Finally, I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance tonight. It's been a wonderful day, and I hope that over the next couple of days we continue to share the ideas that we've embraced through today's session. John, wonderful once again, thank you. To the wonderful staff here at the Shangri-La, I think a round of applause, they've done a wonderful job. And I'd also just like to thank once again Jackie and Glinda for a wonderful organisation, getting us here on time and making it possible. So thank you very much, enjoy the rest of your evening and spend lots of money in Singapore. We need to drive the economy. Thank you.